Good evening, and thank you for logging on to Hidden Histories, URBAN-15's monthly e-magazine on arts and cultural, historical items about San Antonio. We have a fabulous show tonight. It's going to get you hungry, and you're going to want to wish that you were here in the studio with us, because we have all of this great pan dulce. We have masters of the history of the tradition tonight with Dr. Ellen Riojas Clark. We have Patricia Bedoy from a very famous bakery started in 1946 here in San Antonio. And we have a young kind of protege baker who's going to show us tonight about making conchas. So Hidden Histories has been a great expansion for URBAN-15. We are now in several countries, and we get emails and letters from everywhere about suggestions about what we can do to make this show work in the future. We have more ideas that have come in. People have sent their ideas. Then we could go out for 5 years with a monthly show. There's so many topics that people want to cover. One of the things, though, that people want from us is food traditions, dance traditions, music traditions, and we've tried our very hardest to find the people in San Antonio that are the working practitioners, the people who use their hands, their ears, their bodies to create in San Antonio. Next month, we will be featuring, because it's Labor Day, we will be featuring the working musicians of San Antonio, particularly those who played or continue to play in the lobbies of hotels and banks. And we've gone out and found this whole tradition here in San Antonio where the music companies would put a piano into the lobbies, and then they would find the musicians to play. And we're going to have 3 of those musicians coming in on September's episode. So I want to thank everybody, the audience here in the room. We can fight over these last pieces of pan dulce a little later. But we have a special guest tonight, author, historian. I call her a cultural preservationist, advocate for the our entire city, and particularly she's been an advocate for honesty and how our culture is being taught out there in the world. And I've known her for several decades, and she has always been a person that I could trust. When I needed an opinion and get some feedback, she'd always give me the truth about whether my idea was good or bad or anything like that. And her mom was the same way. Her mom was a very strong early supporter of URBAN-15 in the early 80s. So, Dr. Clark, here we are today. We have a lot of things to talk about.
We have to talk about pan dulce, right?
Yeah. But the thing is that what we want to do tonight is for those people who eat but don't know what they're eating, we need to put them in a perspective of they're partaking in culture every time they chomp down.
Bakery. I was always fascinated when go to the bakery, and though we lived on the north side, there was no panaderias where we lived, only donut shops and or the German bakeries. But we would go to where our church was located, and it was always a panaderia. Would walk in, and I would see people saying, I want 1 of those, 2 of those, and 3 of these pretty ones, and a chocolate one of those. And it was always 1 of those, never a name. And I was always fascinated, even as a kid, to know that the people did not know the names. So I think that's what started me in the quest for that. And then historically, as you know, I became an academic, found out a really fascinating thing that's always intrigued me. And it sort of relates to El Día de los Muertos. And that is that our indigenous forefathers and mothers always said that once a name is forgotten, that concept or that person is dead. So very similar to the movie Coco, that is about remembrance. That started me on the quest to get the names of pan dulce that might have disappeared. So I can just keep on going.
No, I'm just trying to think about, okay, what did you find here in San Antonio that people just call, I like the pink one. I mean, what, did you find some, what is here in San Antonio? How many kinds of pan dulce are here?
Well, I would say that most bakeries in town do not make more than 30, 40 kinds of pan dulce. And pan dulce is divided in two categories, salado y dulce.
Yeah.
So the dulce has the largest pieces of bread, and the salado is like los bolillos and filadas, the breads that are used for sandwiches, pan de suelo, I always loved that name, pan de suelo, can you imagine, yeah. And pan protestante, that's a different one, right? And then of course the pan dulce that are always in colors, magical toppings, very, very creative. And I think that even now when I go into a panaderia and I will ask, I always ask, what's the name of that bread, what's the name of that bread, what's the name of it? Sometimes the clerks do not know the names of the breads. And then I will ask the panaderos, what's the name of the breads? And they don't know the names of the breads all the time. So the other day I walked into one of the bakeries and I said, what's that one called? And they said, it's a fruit bar. And I said, I don't think so. And so that fruit bar was, I said, where did y'all get that name? He said, well, that's what the people call it. So that's one thing. Breads have been named by the customers, and breads have been named by the people who created them, which I think is fascinating. Los panaderos are hilarious. Panaderos have this sense of humor, a creativity, artistic license, and then they just go to town and with this basic dough that might be for pan dulce, they will make hundreds of breads and give them different names. But back to the fruit bar. The fruit bar is really a riel, which is a track, or that is filled with fruit, pineapple, and has a little marks on the top. But so that was my point, that names are being lost if we don't do that. So the reason for my writing a book is to document and make sure that these names are there forever. So if people want to go back and find out the names of the breads, they can. The panaderos who make it on a daily basis can also revive the names of the breads.
Your book is a historical and cultural approach to food. Yeah. It's not a cookbook then.
No, it's not a cookbook. But
there's not like Betty Crocker's pan dulce cookbook or something like
I'm a cook, but I don't make pan dulce, and I never have made it until the other day with Logan Iruegas, a 15-year-old who taught me how to make conchas. But I think the neat part of all of that is that the book will have certain recipes. It'll have a recipe for buñuelos, hojarascas, a famous recipe from hojarascas from South Texas, from Roma, Texas, and for semita de nuez, and for pan de muertos, etc. So it'll have some recipes, but not a lot. Yeah, it's going to have a lot of history. It's going to have the background of the pan. And then the most fascinating part for me as a researcher and as an academic was exploring all of the names of the pan dulce. And that, I think, was the most intriguing thing for me, was I was able to classify the names into different categories. So there's pan dulce that deals with body parts, la mano, el brazo, la pierna, las nalgas, and then I won't go into the body parts that are a little bit on the exotic names.
The bachelor party.
The bachelor party bundles. But they're old. I mean, body parts have been around forever, right? So panadero was always going to make a pan that resembled either the senos of a woman or the senos of a nun. Can you imagine? So body parts, gestures like besos, baile, you know, all those kind, abrazos. So that was one category. Another one was that of the regions, pan de Puebla, el pan de tal lugar. So every bread has a classification. And then of course there's all the ones with flowers. You know, there's alcatraces, there's the lilies, the sunflowers. So there's breads with all of these names of margaritas and so forth. And then there's all those of animals. So it can be, you know, el venado, la tortuga, you know, all, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, to get this information, though, you had to get into the kitchens. You had to get into the bakeries themselves. Mm-hmm. The guys don't wear shirts over there in those places. So tell me about what is it? You know, that was the thing my mom always said. You can't go back there because they don't have any shirts. You know, and the guys were always covered with flour, and they were stripped down and their aprons were and they were sweating like crazy. But well, so you went into that environment.
Of course, and saw many body types and many body parts. But I think you brought up something interesting because you said they're all panaderos, all undressed in the top part, and it's true. The majority of panaderos are male. Very few women. I mean, there's women coming in now, but very few women. Women usually tended to be the clerks that would sell the bread, and they knew how to place the bread inside a paper bag. It's always inside of a paper bag or a box. But George, I think you're referring to the jokes about panaderos, right? Because that I did not cover in the book because that would have been a whole other book about jokes about panaderos. But I will tell you about an academic study that was done way back in the 70s. The only academic dissertation that was written on pan dulce, and it was on panaderos. And the name of the chapter that I used in the book for research is called "How Do You Think the Holes in the Donuts Are Made by the Panaderos?" And I will not explore that one anymore. Right?
Well, the thing is that you had to go and travel a lot. So where did you go to during the quest?
Oh, that was the best part. I love to go to Mexico, so I think I've been to every state in Mexico except for maybe 2. So every place I go, I would take pictures of pan dulces and ask the names. And in Mexico, it's interesting. Most of the people know all the names for the pan dulce, and so they have a variety of names that would come from there. But all the way from the Yucatan to northern Mexico to east and west. Everywhere I go, I would go to a panaderia. This book has actually taken me over 5 years to write, to gather the research for it. It's not an easy thing. But Mexico does have a good research basis there. And there's only been one book, a seminal book that was written in Mexico that's now out of print. That was the only book on pan dulce, and this book will be the first one in English about pan dulce.
Okay, we had evidence that somewhere in the UT system, many years ago, there was a young lady who was doing this research, but we can't find the documents. Tell me what happened.
I don't know. I mean, I did the search of all searches for that particular book and have not been able to find it out of the UT Austin, and it caused such a dilemma in Austin because they could not find it. They could not find the dissertation that was written back in the 70s, nor could they find but one folkloric journal, a journal of folklore, that had the article where the name is "How Do You Think the Holes Are Made in the Donuts?"
But that was only one chapter of her dissertation.
That was but the chapter, it was really, her book really dealt with the whole bread making and flour industry. So there was only one chapter on pan dulce and panaderos. In Mexico, there was one book written by a colleague of mine named Sonia Cabrera Iglesias, who wrote probably the only book that's been written in Spanish, but it's out of print. And that book, to find that book in the United States, there were only 3 universities in all of the United States that had a copy of the book. And so it's interesting that this book will revive the interest in pan dulce.
Well, with your particular interest in the subject, you had the knowledge to go and look for a missing dissertation, and it's problematic to me how many more missing dissertations there may be that we just don't know about it, and you know, that's one of the problems with higher ed is we don't know what we don't know. Okay, well listen, let's have a little bit of time here right now. Marisol is cueing me that we actually are going to move to Logan's video right now, and this is Ellen in her first attempt to make pan dulce. It is hard work. So Logan, thank you for the time together.
My favorite part about baking is seeing all the flour and water get mixed together into just a clump, and then having to knead, and then finally seeing it into a nice dough ball that's soft and silky.
Well, I'm not a chef, but what I love is to be creative in the kitchen. I think that's the fun part, that it's an act, you know, it's cooking is a creative process, and it's really stimulating. So it's always a challenge to figure out, what am I going to make? How can I make it a little different? What can I add to it? So therefore, I'm an unorthodox cook, yes.
Well, I've been making bread for about 4 years now, and only recently in the past few months have I really felt I can like diverge from recipes and like create my own bread, and that it's really solid and people enjoy it.
Well, it's a communal thing. Number one, yes, if you're the only one person in the kitchen, you're cooking by yourself, but you have some sorts of spirits behind you, guiding you. You know, am I putting enough salt? Am I putting enough ajo? Am I putting enough this? Somewhere in the background of your brain, somebody's telling you, mijita, that's enough. No more salt, no more pepper, or add a little bit or something. So it's a communal thing with my background, my mother, whoever taught me how to cook.
Today we're going to be making concha pan dulce, and the reason why we chose it is because at my brother's graduation party, me and Dr. Clark were talking, and we talked about making different pan dulces, and conchas are my favorite just because of the style of the bread. So that's why we're making pan dulce de concha today.
So I think what's unusual today is that I have never, ever, ever, ever made pan dulce. I do what most people do. I go to the panaderia and I buy it. And I love the smell, I love the texture, but I never was bold enough to try making pan dulce. So I think the best part of all of this is I'm not going to be the teacher, I'm going to be the learner. I can tell them about pan dulce. I can tell them about the process, about the history, about the names, about all of that. But what I don't know is the process, and that's what Logan is going to teach me today, is how to make conchas for the very first time in my life. The thing we do, Logan, is you've got to put on a delantal, which means an apron, which means delantal means in front of. So you put it in front of so you don't get all dirty. And so tell me some of the things that you had needed for this recipe.
So the most important things are the spices that in the bread, because that's what really signifies the concha, which is we're gonna need nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon.
Huh.
And then we're also gonna have to have
Vanilla.
yeah, vanilla. And then of course we need salt because salt is the universal flavoring. And then we also need eggs because this is gonna be a soft bread.
And that's a sweet dough, and there is a salty dough. And for those two doughs, you can make over 2,000 kinds of pan dulce. And then there's a third dough that's called mil hojas, or the multiple layers like that, where they make capuchanas and so forth. Am I doing a good job here? Okay.
That's good.
Okay, that's
And
enough.
then
Okay.
we're gonna take the yeast and we're just gonna pour it in the milk.
That's a cup of milk.
Yeah, a cup of milk.
All right.
And that's just we're gonna stir that around a little bit. And that's the cloves. So you're gonna need,
This is nuez moscada. I love that word.
and so you're gonna need a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1 1/4 teaspoons of cinnamon. And then we're
Okay.
gonna add the salt, which is just 1 teaspoon.
Okay.
And then we do this mixing motion with our hands. So we
Okay,
just
you do it. You do
put a
it.
claw in there,
Put a claw
and
in.
then we go clockwise, and that mixes it all together. And we do this S, where it goes like that, and then we do it again. And that makes it all, that evenly distributes all the seasonings. And you can really see it's changed color to almost a light brown.
Okay, tell me.
Yep, same thing.
Okay, claw,
Yep.
clockwise, S.
Yep.
Claw,
Clockwise, S.
S. Okay, claw. I said I wasn't to do it.
Yeah.
No,
And so,
I forgot. Okay. Claw,
clockwise,
S. Okay.
then we're just gonna take the butter and we're gonna break it up a little bit so it's easier to distribute. We're just gonna crush that up a little bit, and we're gonna put that in right there. So this has to be softened, or you're just gonna have rock hard pieces of butter in your dough, and that's not good.
Okay, so I had it softened until this morning.
Yeah. Fork, wooden fork, and I've been using this the whole time I've been baking. And all you do is you mix up all the wet ingredients like this, and you just push the butter to the side because it's not gonna mix in.
So you use the top and the bottom
It's
of the fork.
Yeah, multi-tool. And then, so you can see now the flour is not getting incorporated, so all I do is I go around the outer edge, and I bring in the flour, and then I mix it.
A little at a time.
A little at a time, because you want each flour, like each grain of flour, to get saturated. So it takes a while, but it ends up with better results.
And this way you're just bringing it a little at a time. That is a totally new technique for me.
Yeah.
Huh.
So then, once it's at this stage where it's a slurry, almost like porridge, I go all the way around the bowl, bringing in the flour, and I just try to get as much in. And this is the stage where it's going to become a shaggy dough, as you can see.
Shaggy dough.
Yeah,
The
it's
vocabulary.
It's literally
fabulous.
just falling apart, and it looks like shaggy hair. I just scrape off all the dough I can and save as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to put this right into water, or this will become rock hard, and it'll be really hard. And I just scrape off all the sides, and I do this motion where I dig under and I flip. Is we have to develop gluten, so we're just gonna fold it on itself, just like this. And we're just gonna keep doing this until it gets to a stage where I can pick it up and slap it down on the table. Yeah, so when I encounter a butter clump, all I do is I pinch it into the dough, which flattens it, and that's why you need it to be softened, or it's just gonna be really hard and you're not gonna be able to do that.
Something that was sweetened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the creativity starts
Mhm.
with all of the different recipes, just based on two doughs. The salty dough, which is where they make the bolillos with, or the French bread, and what is then used for teladas, which are for the sandwich bread, biscuits. Then the sweet one then gets made into multiple breads. My turn, okay. So slap and what?
Slap and fold. So take it from this side, bring it up, and then slap it down, and try to fold it, and try to keep the back end, and try to fold it up.
Okay.
And so what that's doing, if you imagine,
I can't slap it.
Yeah, it gets hard. And you can see how the skin is forming already.
A skin. Oh yes, yes.
See? Yeah. So right there, this is the basic skin forming.
Oh
You can
my
push it
God.
apart, and you can see some of the gluten strands. And we just do this until we get a really nice, smooth skin.
So you really cannot do this just with the recipe. It means experience.
Yeah.
To be able, because you're reading the dough, right?
Uh-huh.
To see when it's just right.
And that's why I don't like to use a stand mixer, because
You don't like to use what?
I don't like to use the stand mixer
Uh-huh.
because you can't feel the dough, because the dough is really the thing that tells you when it's done. It's not a certain amount of time because it might be a little bit cold. You might have added a little too much water. But this dough, it'll just tell you when it's done. Okay, so after the dough has been put back in the bowl, we're gonna create the topping, which is just mixing the butter and the sugar to create a fluffy exterior, and then we're gonna mix in flour to create it more of a tacky paste, and then we're gonna form the dough balls. And that's just the process of cutting the dough and creating balls and then placing them down. And we're gonna take the tacky substance, we're gonna put it on there, and we're gonna detail it with a knife, and we're gonna put it on a parchment lined baking sheet, and then we're gonna let that rest for 30 minutes, and then put it into a 350-degree oven for 15 to 16 minutes. And if you have any questions, just go to the website in the description, and you can find the recipe that I've written up with more detail. We're gonna take these with all of the pastries on top, and we're gonna put it into a 350-degree oven right down here. Just like that. Okay, after cooking for 16 minutes, we're gonna take the conchas out. And they should look absolutely beautiful, just like these.
Oh, beautiful! Oh my God!
And you don't wanna, they're gonna be really hot, and what you can do is use your fingernails to pick them up, and all you're gonna do is tap them, and you can tell that they're hollow.
And then of course when you bring it to the table, I love that part because that's, again, performance art. You walk in with your platter or whatever, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, look at how beautiful it is. Or the smell. The smell precedes you walking in there, or it precedes, fills up the house. So of course that's a very delightful thing. But then to sit down and to look around at everybody looking, and there's always a moment, that you stop before you start serving and before you start eating, when everybody does relish that idea of coming together. So can you pass the conchas, handmade by Logan, and this one already.
Well, look, we're having a great day. Congratulations. This is the greatest lesson that we've ever had in dulce making. Let's get back to the studio and we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Ellen Clark.
Thank you so much, Logan Iruegas. I was fascinated by your knowledge and your integration of science and math and chemistry, because what the audience doesn't get to hear is all of your detailed explanation of what happens when you make this bread. And the other is that Logan is 15 years old. He's been making bread for 4 years. And I would ask him, where did you learn this technique? He says, well, when I learned how to make Japanese milk rolls or the noodles, so he has learned and adapted many different baking techniques to the making of pan dulce. So he knows how to make French croissants, beignets, English oatmeal, honey bread, and of course now pan dulce. Needless to say, you're in the GT program, right?
Yeah.
And what do you want to be in life when you grow up?
I would like to be a math professor when I grow up.
You will be a math professor who specializes in the chemistry of pan dulce. Tell me, Logan, why did you want to learn how to make pan dulce?
Well, like I mentioned in the video, we had gotten talking at my brother's graduation party. And the other part is I've been eating pan dulce, especially conchas, like my entire life. I remember going to my grandma's house, and then we would go out to eat, and then there would be a little bakery section in the store, and I'd be like, I want the pink one. And then later on I'd realize that the name was concha. And the one thing that baking does and all food does, it connects people. And I wanted to be able to connect with people that eat conchas and eat pan dulce and converse with them and learn the culture behind it.
How has that increased your interaction with the females at school?
Well, I do get a lot of comments by people that follow my Instagram page on they want to get some bread just from me, and it's actually interesting. It's not just females or males; it's everybody. I mean, the teachers. I try to give it out to everybody to make a more connected community, but it definitely has helped in that department.
I am sure.
You know, how many names do we know of that describe the concha? How many names are there out there?
Well, you know, I can tell what region you're from by the name that you use. So concha is used like central Mexico, that area. We use pan de huevo in South Texas because it's made with eggs, and so it's an egg dough. And other people use molletes for the concha. So it has many names. This particular looking bread, because the same dough can be used to make other kinds of things. All of them have the design to make it look like a shell. So that's kind of interesting. Who made the first concha? I don't know, but very possibly somebody that lived near the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. Or like the water. What's the hardest thing about making pan dulce?
Well, when I first started to develop the recipe, it was one of the first times I used milk in a recipe, and if you've been baking bread, you know that water is really good at dissolving things, and especially hydrating the flour. But with milk, it's kind of tricky. If you don't use that special technique of incorporating all of the flour, you'll get huge clumps in it. And I remember making my first few batches, and I would knead it, and it would just tear apart, and I'd kind of fall back almost. And I would get frustrated with it because I didn't know what was happening. And I finally realized if I slowly incorporate that flour, then that gluten will form earlier, and it'll create a stretchier dough. So that was the hardest part, just trial and error, and that was the best part too.
We noticed that it's very physical work. And you were working with, on Sunday, about 8 or 10 pounds of dough in that area. But the tradition is a 30-pound ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, a 30-pound ball. I mean, that takes a lot of strength, which may also, the reason why it's a male-dominated.
Males, exactly.
Yeah.
So what was the hardest part about that?
That part, well, when I first started baking, I would get exhausted really quickly, and I would just refuse to knead. I would make my mom knead. But then I started to, I started to, become more conscious, and I tried to work my arm muscles more. But that is hard. I mean, after 10 minutes of that type of kneading, even with that size ball that I had, I would be sweating, absolutely drenched, and I can understand why they would have to be undressed in that sort of environment.
Well, you said that you did not want to use the mixer because you couldn't tell if the dough was ready. I mean,
yeah, because your dough can become stiff if you use a mixer for too long. But when you use your hands, you can feel the dough stretching. And it's at that point where it's stretching but not tearing where you want it to be. And you can test it by taking the dough and literally stretching out with your hands and making a window. And you can basically see through the dough because that's how fine the gluten strands are entwined. And so when you're in a mixer, you can't do that. I mean, you're just going to leave it out and you can't touch it. You can see the outside, but that texture that you can only feel with your hands, you don't even need your eyes. You can just feel it with your hands. That's the most important thing about bread making over any culture.
So how was it integrating different groups' ways of making bread into pan dulce?
Well, the first, like I said, I had a really hard time kneading. So I would always look for recipes that were either no knead or really easy. But then I started to do more research into cultures, and I stumbled across these videos on these Japanese noodle makers, and I saw how they incorporated the dough in this almost earth-like manner of a volcano erupting or the ocean splashing against the waves. And I saw you don't have to use much force. You have to guide the dough. You're not forcing the dough. You're just guiding it with your hands, almost like a message or a wave. And so I just use those same techniques. And I've always wanted to learn new techniques because you can apply them to many different types of breads.
So what is the most surprising thing you learned about pan dulce?
The most surprising thing would have to be how connected even people from two different cultures can be. I was talking with my friend, I was talking about the show, and I was mentioning that I was making conchas, and she's like, I have no idea what those are. And I tried to explain it to her, and she didn't understand. But then I went back home, and I had made some, and I sent her some pictures. And so then she was like, I know exactly what those are. I've had thousands of them. I love them. And I was like, yeah. And we ended up having a conversation on different types of bread she's had and her experience in going to other countries, because she's mainly Anglo-Saxon, and getting to see the other culture. And I get to experience another point of view from my own Hispanic point of view. And I think that is amazing, and how open you can be to learning new things from different people.
Fabulous.
Wonderful.
Totally incredible.
Ellen, in your research, I guess it makes sense that the amount of labor it took to do this meant that you could only have a certain volume, and that kind of supported a small neighborhood, the volume of a bread you could make in a given day. And, we've had that in San Antonio, and your research has been about the many family-owned.
Especially here in San Antonio, but the book will also have an appendix that lists hundreds of panaderias throughout the United States. So every town, I was stunned to find out that Connecticut has panaderias, Maine has panaderias. Every town that possibly has been visited by someone who is from Mexico has a panaderia. So panaderias are small businesses, and one of the versus the big bread making industry, because they make it on a daily basis. It's fresh pan dulce in the morning and in the afternoon. So can they have more than one bakery? Of course, but the bakery, the volume is set by what they probably determine to be their customer base, and which are the most popular breads, which is why you don't have a bakery that makes 1,000 breads. It's that they make the ones that are most popular and the ones that are most well known. It's been interesting to see the price of pan dulce grow from a long time ago, from maybe 5 cents a piece, to now what the price is. And that varies from town to town. LA, you're going to find some bread that's $1 a piece. Well, so can you here in San Antonio. So now it's become a boutique kind of panaderia versus also the community or the neighborhood kind of panaderias.
We're moving quite quickly through our segment here, but at some point, do we have some photos or some slides of some of the local stuff available?
I think they're even going to give us, can we name the bread too, right?
Okay.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
You have a lot.
Okay. So, John, do we have, there. What is that one called?
That one is from the Yucatan, and that's called a rombo because of the shape, and it's, a mathematical kind of a shape, sort of like a square like this, and it's got a fresh mango on top, and it's the most delicious. And the thing about pan dulce, even though it's called sweet bread, it's really not sweet. It's not sweet at all. And that last one I think was a cuerno, and cuerno is used. You can have a cuerno that is a horn, but it's also, that's the cuerno right there, and that one's a manteca. And they have other kinds of cuernos. So you can buy a cuerno de mantequilla, which is a fluffy one. You can have one that's called a bigote. It kind of looks the same, and it doesn't have sugar on it. So it's the same bread in different forms,
Well, I've really enjoyed these few minutes together, and I want to show y'all. We're going to have to move on to something we've always done at Hidden Histories, and that's the found photos and found images.
Oh, nice.
And I want to share with y'all something we found from Buttercrust. So we're gonna move ahead real quickly here, and we found some TV commercials, black and white TV commercials from 1950.
Yeah.
of buttercrust bread, and then we found some from 1980. And again, this big industrial size strength.
Did you hear what the lady said when she named her favorite bread? I said buttercrust is a favorite family must. Do you know what the lady knew? That buttercrust is good for you. Better buy buttercrust, make it your family must. It's buttercrust bread like the lady said.
Yes, friends, we like to talk about buttercrust, and we even like to sing about it too. For buttercrust is baked with quality ingredients in one of the finest bakeries in the country. Your buttercrust bakers are so proud of their fine bakery that they have prepared this 24-page illustrated booklet telling all about the baking of this quality bread. Write for your free copy now and learn how this fine bread is baked. Remember, too, a buttercrust route man services your store each weekday. The blue gingham buttercrust wrapper is your assurance of fresh, flavorful bread whenever, wherever you buy it.
What does it take to become a winner? It takes caring for your body in a special way, with proper exercise and rest. It requires special nutrition from a well-balanced diet, but most of all, it takes a personal desire to be the very best. For over 100 years, we've placed our reputation on your table. Enriched buttercrust bread.
Well, welcome, Patricia Bedoy. Nice to have you. I call you Patty. So can I call you Patty?
Yeah,
No,
call
of
me
course.
Patty, please.
Patty. So I'll call you Patty. So your panaderia is the first one that I remember as a child, going on 24th Street. And then, of course, the one on the north side that came to the north side. Tell us a little bit about the background and the history of the Bedoy family and how they started their panaderia business.
Well, the history is very interesting. I call it a love story.
Yeah.
And the reason is my mother-in-law, which is Emma Castillo and Manuel Bedoy, they met at a bakery here in San Antonio. It used to be Castillo's Bakery. So Manuel Bedoy went to work at Castillo's Bakery. But the most interesting thing is all his background was working as a panadero in Mexico.
What part of Mexico?
In Jalisco, Juanacatlan, Jalisco. So he came from Juanacatlan, Jalisco, and started working at Castillo's Bakery long time ago. He met Emma Bedoy. They fell in love, they got married, and of course the father-in-law told him it's time to go and open your own bakery. So they did that, and they.
But she also came from a
She also
panadero
came
background.
from background of panaderos. So the very interesting part is, and they both came from panaderos. So it was
And
meant to
where
be.
was she from?
She was from Michigan. She was born here in Michigan, but her family, some of her family was from Monterrey, Mexico.
And that's where they had their bakery.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last name Bedoy is another part, and is interesting is because, as you know, the pan dulce just was created when the French, the French came to Mexico and then invade Mexico, whatever you want to call it. And they start working with the panaderos back then. So the mix of the French bread and the Mexican bread created pan dulce. So the last name Bedoy, background Bedoy is French, the last name. We don't look French, of course, but anyway, they met, when Manuel Bedoy met Emma, they got married, they opened Bedoy's Bakery. And that's when Bedoy's Bakery started here in San Antonio, and it has continued for years and years being a tradition here. using the same recipes.
The same recipes, and also the quality of ingredients. What I remember about reading about the Bedoys, and as I used to know your father-in-law before he passed away, and Mrs. Bedoy, was the interest in doing traditional breads as they came from Monterrey and as they came from central Mexico. And one of the things I remember exactly when it started was el pan de muertos. And I think that the Bedoys were the very first ones to start making pan de muertos again in San Antonio, when we used to have the observations for the Dia de los Muertos. Tell us about your father-in-law making el pan de muertos.
Well, he started because it was a Reverend here in San Antonio, Reverend Elizondo, who had the idea to recreating the pan de muerto here after he visited Mexico. So he approached my father-in-law and asked him if he could make some pan de muerto here, but he wanted the original pan de muerto, which is the form of a person. And of course, Mr. Bedoy remembered the way they used to make the pan de muerto in Mexico, and he started making those for the Reverend, and that's how the tradition started. And from there, it just grew up. You know, during that time, there were lines, as they tell me, it was lines and lines to purchase the pan de muerto. And right now is our busiest day of the year, is the pan de muerto, Dia de los Muertos, and pan de muerto. When we make the pan de muerto, is our busiest day, even busier than Christmas.
And the pan de muertos, of course, is to commemorate the coming of the spirits and the people who have passed on coming to visit us. So we always welcome them with pan de muertos. And the figure originally was a round one like this that just had like bones on the top. And then they started making a very simple little figure of a bread, but then it became this elaborate thing.
It is.
That Bedoy's, I think, has really made it a very special bread, because they dress up these breads, and some of them are, you know, what are the sizes?
They could be, I don't know too much on measurements, but this is like, the large one is like, it could be up to 2 feet.
So 2 feet all the way to smaller ones.
Small ones.
And I think what's so special is that your father-in-law, and now the Javier and Hector and all of them, make the bread with a very, quality ingredients?
Yeah, the same ingredients and they used before. Even now it's harder to find those ingredients, but we still, you know, try to use the same recipes. The pan de muerto is like a very rich concha. It will have the same ingredients, but also it will have butter, milk, and some of the orange zest as well. And the preparation is a work of art. It's, you know, every piece that they make is different. It's very hard to make one similar to the other one, because it's handmade and with a lot of detail. We made male and female. Some customers want some, you know, the male with a mustache, certain kind of color, the dress. Some people even ask for their football teams. They want the color of the football team or their favorite colors.
Well, I think I must be the only one who has had a pan de muertos made in my image. and your brother-in-law, who has since passed away, made me with big hair, big glasses, and a huipil. And the funny part was that people would go in and say, I want a pan de muertos like Dr. Clark. But the thing about pan de muertos is you never make it in the honor or in the shape of somebody who's still alive.
No.
It's only when you die. So I kept telling Bedoy,
please don't.
Don't make me anymore. Wait till I die before you make the pan dulce. And I think that, do you ship them all over the United States, a pan de muerto?
We have inquirers, you know, to ship it, or some family members, they come and purchase the bread and then they send it to their relatives. We have that a lot, even with our regular conchas, empanadas, they do that a lot. They go all the way to Michigan. People continue, mailing or
Well,
shipping
I
the
take
bread.
pan dulce to every occasion with my granddaughters in St. Louis and in Boston, all over the United States, for sure. Let me ask you about how many kinds of pan dulce do you make at the Bedoys?
It's hard to tell you, but I could say it's different times. Like you mentioned before, not everybody purchase the bread, not everybody knows it. So we cater to either the season or we cater to the neighborhood, but I will say near probably 100 different types.
Oh, wow. So what
At different times of the year.
What are your most popular ones?
Conchas.
The concha, the most famous one of all. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Patty, in telling us about Bedoy's, one of the longest established bakeries here in San Antonio, among many others. The Castillo, which was the one you mentioned, the Perez's that had the one-armed baker that was there, and of course, the Perez's of Henry Cisneros' or Mary Alice Cisneros' family. So now we're going to see a poem, one of my most favorite poems by Jacinto Cardona, who wrote a poem called Pan Dulce.
I remember riding my fenderless bike to La Panaderia del Pueblo. Sometimes I would go alone. Sometimes I would dream I took Abuelo by the hand. I remember pan dulce tasting even sweeter after confessing my sins at St. Joseph's Catholic Church. Nothing like dulcified bread for crucified bones. I remember standing in front of the glass displays, telling El Panadero, I'll take one of these, and one of those, and one of these. Unlike the cool Pachuco who came in asking for un regalo, pan de polvo, y un hueso azucarado to go, I had not mastered the names of pan dulce. So imagine my thrill, imagine the authority in my chavalon bones when I returned asking for dos huesos azucarados, 2 sugared bones to go. Yes, I remember pan dulce, La Virgen de Guadalupe bordered by blue neon lights, and how the smell of canela reminded me of Abuelito's piloncillo skin.
You know, we've had a great evening here because we've dealt a lot with technical things, nomenclature, history, where we all fit together. But what I'm observing is that as folk and traditional arts and as a culture, all of a sudden it gets appropriated sometimes, and sometimes it becomes commercialized, and we're finding greater and greater pan dulce made by people who don't, necessarily.
Well, I don't know that you would call it appropriation in some of the pan dulce. I think it's appropriation on both sides, but for me it means the creativity of the panadero who sees a donut and then decides, hey, that donut would look good with the capa of a concha. So on top of the donut, he puts this kind of shell thing on it, and then he calls it a doña concha. And the literary aspect of that name, a doña is a woman, could be an arrogant woman, or it could be a woman who is just hard to take. So the creativity of that name, ¿es una doña Concha or is una doña Concha? And I think that's the beauty. The other is donuts with, conchas with bacon on top. So instead of having the shell, they have fried the bacon and they put it on the top instead of the sugar part. The other one that's fabulous and to die for is the concha burger. I mean, I really, really like the concha burger. It's sliced in half. It's got mustard and mayonnaise. It's got lettuce and tomato and a hamburger patty. But think about it, the salty and the sweet, natural kind of a thing. So I think the beauty of pan dulce is that it's not a dying art. Every panadero that comes in that is hired has the potential to create a new pan based upon who he is or she is, and has the ability to create an art piece that might have the long-lasting thing as a concha, or just like the Mona Lisa lasts forever. That one is an old one. And the other is maybe to combine the flavor of a concha, and Logan, we got to think about this, maybe putting some wasabi sauce in, no, think about it, a little sharpness,
punch, there like that?
It might just be the new thing to do. So pan dulce is alive and well, continues to grow and become something that reminds us of who we are, what our culture is, our rich, rich history, because pan dulce goes back to the codices in the indigenous times. They didn't use sugar, but they used honey and seeds and so forth. So we're eating something that has a long history, a long culture, and then it is about us as Mexican Americans.
Well, I've really enjoyed spending some time being enlightened by you. This is really amazing. I'm looking forward to your book. And if there's anything that we can do to help get the word out that the best history book on pan dulce ever written, will be coming out of San Antonio in the next few.
It'll be summer of 2020, so next year, and it's going to be called, the title is not firm, but the compendium.
Compendium.
The compendium. I better get another name, right? The Compendium of Mexican Pan Dulce.
Well, this has been a work of great love and great research on your part, and we're so happy that Trinity University embraced this project.
Right.
Yeah, and you would think that there would be some coming from somewhere else. How did that happen?
Well, they had asked me to submit a proposal. It took several years. The publication of books takes a long time. So originally I had gone to University of New Mexico. Long story short, I'm also an alumni at Trinity, so I think it's perfect. And so I love the idea of instead having it come from the publishing company here in San Antonio.
Well, rumor has it in the community that every time you went to one of those publishing meetings, you took a bag.
Yeah, there you go. That's the best marketing tool ever.
Okay, well, we were very happy. Hidden Histories tonight, it's something that all of us have known all of our lives, and we got a little bit more insight into the richness of the tradition. I just kind of laugh now that you used to be able to get it under glass and pick it out, and then now there's stores that have them in the little plastic sealed bags now, and
right.
little wrappers and stuff. And I'm just fascinated too that a young man like Logan would embrace making pan dulce in this time of the 21st century. This is just really wonderful. It gives me great optimism about how cultures grow.
How cultures grow.
And
I think having that scientific background that he brings to it, well, number one, every panadero is a scientist. Every panadero uses chemistry, uses mathematics and so forth. They might not be able to articulate the formulas like Logan does. Because one of the things that I found fascinating is he said his mother's allergic to gluten, but she can eat his pan dulce, and it's because it doesn't have preservatives in it. So I think that is the very interesting aspect of what science can tell us about that, but also the whole design. And then the personal stories about pan dulce. I love the one by Jesse Trevino, who is a very famous artist and internationally known artist. And his mother would send him to buy pan dulce. So when I interviewed him, he's, you know, a painter, and he also paints with words, as he describes to me the pan dulce. He'd wait outside the panaderia, bring home two to 3 bags of pan dulce, because there were 11 in the family. But then his mother would hide the pan dulce because she wanted it to last for the merienda that day. And she would hide it in the washing machine and put the dirty clothes on top of it, because she knew that none of the sons would go near that washing machine. What a great story, right? What a wonderful story.
But the daughters did.
So I think if you ask, whoever you ask, will have a personal story about the relationship to pan dulce. The question I like to ask everybody is, what is your favorite pan dulce and why? And ask me mine.
What is your favorite?
Mine is the campechana. I love the campechana because it's so crispy, and only, I hate to say this, only Bedoy's on Hildebrand makes the best one, because a real good campechana has to have a hole in the middle. It has to just not be empty. So I'm, for another marketing tool, when the book comes out, I'm going to instigate a making of an Elena. And an Elena is going to be a campechana filled with, not filled, with a little layer of dulce de leche, pecans, and tequila. And I think that's going to be a winner. So don't forget to ask for an Elena next time you go to the
on
bakery.
the rocks. Okay, well, thank you very, very much. You know, the small businesses that made the West Side what it is, you know, are very important. And I keep thinking back the stories as kids, you know, and there was, you signed, you know, there was credit, you could make a loan, you could do so many things because that was the business of the community. The small bakery and the small, you know, mom and pop grocery store. And I really miss that sensation. You can't walk into one of these little gas mart type places and get that feeling anymore. Yeah. You can't walk into the big boxes and get that feeling. So,
but you can walk into a panaderia and you will have the same aromas immediately. And I know that I mentioned different panaderias for different kinds of breads. Some are famous for one more than the other. So neighborhoods always have a specialty in terms of the bread that they have.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. Is there a doctor in the house? Yes, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.